your initial for your pillowcase, you need to choose the letter that you want, and today we're making S for Spike, and we'll take the S letters out of the bag that are in a paper clip. And then remove one from under the paper clip, making sure to keep the other ones and put them back neatly inside the bag. Then when you have this, we're going to use your seam gauge ruler and come over here to the bottom side. So we'll be putting the initial in the bottom of the middle, not on the bottom of the long edge. So at the bottom of the middle, and the trim will attach below there. So come to the side of your fabric, and you'll have a 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. And so I'm marking it there. And you'll take one pin from your pin cushion and put that pin parallel to the cut edge over here, and just mark that seam allowance distance. Then to find the center, we will fold the fabric in half to where the pin is. And with your finger, take and do a finger crease. Use your thumbnail and just press right along that fold right there, and that will mark the center, the middle line of your pillowcase. You don't have to go up, but you should be able to see the crease right along there. Then you're going to take your letter, and it should also be folded in half, and these are italic letters, so the line isn't going, they should be slanted slightly. So once you have it opened up like this, you're going to put this folded edge here right along that crease right here, and then you want it to be 5 centimeters or 2 inches from the bottom of the pillowcase. So with your 2-inch line at the bottom of the pillowcase going up, I want the bottom of the S to be 2 inches or 5 centimeters from the bottom edge. Then you're going to take this pin that you had over here and put your pin in up at the top of your letter. Then you're going to take a piece of chocolate paper, and this happens to be colored on both sides, but make sure that the colored side is down on the fabric so that you can trace the letter. And I'm going to slide the chocolate paper to cover all of the letter, and you can use a dull pencil like this that's not too sharp, or you can use a tracing wheel to trace it. I personally prefer the pencil, so I'm going to use the pencil, and I'm going to trace one time, and I'm going to press very hard to make sure that the tracing paper marking goes onto the fabric, and I press really hard one time. And then just to check it so that you can see it, you should be able to see the fabric, the marking on the fabric. If you can't see it, stop at this point and press harder, or change to a different piece of chocolate paper. Then go ahead and keep on tracing, pressing really hard and being careful to not let it slip or move around. Okay, and at that point you can take out the pin and remove the letter, and you should be able to see your letter S on your pillowcase. Get ready for hand sewing. You can choose either a long needle or a shorter one from the persimmon pincushion. These needles in this pincushion all have a larger hole than regular hand sewing needles. They're called sashiko needles, and it makes it easier to sew with. So when you're getting ready to sew your initial, choose the color of thread that looks nice together with your fabric and your trim, and then thread the needle. You need to get it wet by putting the end of it in your mouth to get it wet, and take your thumb and your forefinger and press that really hard till it's flat. And once you have it flat, then you can take this and slide the end of the thread into the end of the needle, and pull it through. You need to have the tail thread about half of the length of this shorter piece, and you need to come down to the bottom and put a knot in this end. To make a knot, you put the end of the thread about 2 centimeters up on your finger and hold it with your thumb and wrap it around one time. And then with your thumb, roll it back and forth. And as you roll it and twist it, you can pull and pinch the edge of the thread and put a knot in that end. There's one very, very important step right here that you need to do, and that is to put the embroidery hoop onto the fabric. But you must open up the fabric. If you don't, you won't be able to put the pillowcase inside. So the hoop comes apart, and the smaller inside piece goes in between. So there should be, open the fabric out like this so that it's completely open, and put the hoop centering the letter in the middle as much as possible. That will make it easier when you sew. The part of the hoop that has the adjustable pin right here, you can put on top, and you want to press it over the fabric. Pressed it too tight perhaps. Until the fabric is taut. And let's press that. So now you can see that the fabric is pretty tight inside the embroidery hoop. Usually if you drop a pin on it, it will bounce off. Then you know you have it tight enough. And you want to come up from the bottom side. Usually you start at the top here. So on the letter S, we're going to sew in this direction, turn and come back around the outside. Then we'll come underneath here and go up here and come down and around like this. And then tunnel under right there and come back and finish right there. Okay, so to start sewing, make sure that the knot does not end up being on top. So go underneath, and you can kind of draw a line with your needle to see where you're at, and you want to come up right there. If you're right-handed, you're going to hold it, pull it through so that the knot is right at the edge of the fabric. Try not to have a tail like that hanging out. Pull it all the way through to the end. And then as you start sewing, if you're right-handed, you hold the needle in your right hand and you take 2 stitches forward and go back 1 stitch. It looks like this: 1, 2 stitches forward, 1 stitch backward, and you want to make sure that this tail is down, and as you come backwards and go through, you're going to go over that tail where you started. So then pull it through, and don't pull it too tight that it wrinkles the fabric, but you do want to have your stitches in securely. So then you take this tail out of the fabric and hold it down, and then go from the middle to the end is 1 stitch, and 1 more stitch forward, 2 stitches forward, 1 stitch backward. And then when you come out, you're always coming out where the other stitch ends. So then you'll just go back and you continue that motion until you get to the end. If you are left-handed, you're going to be holding it in the opposite hand and going the other direction. So in left-handed, you will still keep this down, and then keep going 2 stitches forward, 1 stitch backward, and keep it down. Although because I started right-handed, I'm going to turn that. Okay, so then go 2 stitches forward, 1 stitch backward, keeping that tail down. And pull it a little bit tight. And if you continue to have the tail consistently in the same direction, you'll have a very nice, it's called a stem stitch, and it will look smooth and consistent. If you don't have it, if you have it up one time and down the next, up and down, you get a stitch that looks kind of like a zigzag, and so it won't be as smooth and straight as that. So watch out for that as you continue to sew. Okay. And so to finish off, do your last few stitches with 2 stitches forward, 1 stitch backward, always keeping the tail down. And as you come to your last stitch, you're going to want to end up with the needle and the thread on the back side of the fabric. Take 2 more stitches. So for your very last stitch, keep that down. So on the very last stitch, you're going to connect to where the other stitch goes on and then push it through to the back side, and this time turn your embroidery hoop over and come up from the back side. And then where you came through leaves a little space, and in that little space take a tiny stitch that doesn't show on the front side, and then push the needle through about 2 centimeters and take the remaining tail of thread from that comes through the pillowcase and wrap it around 2 or 3 times and hold this thread back while you pull the needle forward. And then keep your thumb on that thread there to create a knot, and as you pull the thread through, pull it all the way tight so that the thread creates a knot right at the edge of the fabric. And then before you take your needle off, come up here and let the needle go all the way down, and use your needle to push the knot tightly against the edge of the fabric. And then once you've done that, you can take the needle off and cut the tail of thread to about a 1 centimeter length. And if you have any other threads that are longer than that, cut them down. So there you have finished your initial for your hand embroidery. Then you can take off the embroidery hoop from the outside and just put the pieces back together, and you can put it back in the drawer for the embroidery hoops.